Morning, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me loud and clear. Just give everyone a few more minutes to jump in. But first and foremost, welcome to today's Demo Day Wednesday. My name is Matthew Murphy, one of the Strategic Business Development Managers here at FE. I'll give another intro in a few seconds' time as well. Just give everyone a little bit of time to jump in. But today, hopefully you guys will know when you signed up, this is just going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour into our onboarding and cash flow planning tool, CashCalc, predominantly today on the sort of cash flow planning side of things. We'll talk briefly on the onboarding and the capabilities of that, as well as some exciting upgrades to come, including ones that already have came as well. So, a few more people. I'll wait until 2 minutes past before cracking on, and just one last little introduction before we crack on. Also, just worth mentioning as well, just a bit of housekeeping before I start. We do have the ability to ask questions today. So there is a chat box function that you should see in the top right. I've got a colleague join me that should be able to answer any questions. I will answer what I can towards the end of the session as well. So we've got about 45 minutes. The demo itself should be around 30 to 35. Leave plenty of time for questions and any queries that you might have. Anything I can't answer for whatever reason, we will be exporting these questions and we'll be passing them on to your account manager as needed. So, yeah, without further ado, let's crack on. It's now 2 minutes past. So again, just as a bit of an intro, my name is Matthew Murphy, one of the Strategic Business Development Managers here at FE. And today, just going to give a bit of a whistle-stop tour into our cash flow planning tool, CashCalc. Also is an onboarding tool as well. Sort of rivals with the likes of IO Planning and a few other bits, IO Portal and other bits and pieces as well. Won't dive too much into that, but I will give a bit of an understanding of what the functionalities are within there. So let's just go through the actual agenda then today. So just today, just ultimately navigating your way around CashCalc. So just a bit of a sort of, this is how to set yourself up, get ready and do all things cash flow planning. We'll also talk on how you can import client data. So there's a few different ways we can do that, whether that's building them from scratch or indeed importing them from one of our many back office integrations. Also, of course, being a cash flow tool, going to showcase how to actually build cash flow and more importantly, run some what if scenarios. So the what if scenario today is actually a protection case in our gross cash flow modeler. So we've got two main cash flow modelers. We've got a net and a gross. One, of course, takes into tax planning and all this kind of stuff, which is what we'll be doing today. Also, again, mentioned this word at least 4 times already, just talking about integrations. So linking FE Analytics and CashCalc with other tools as well, and just showcase where you can do that, how that works, and so on and so forth. And then lastly, answering any questions that you might have towards the end of the session as well. So just to give you a bit of a brief understanding as to who we are, hopefully you guys are very, very familiar with who we are, but we service quite a number of different sort of platforms and areas within the financial market. We actually service 100% of the top 10 IFAs in the UK, as well as 95% of the top 100. So yeah, super stuff, and we're keen to continue that sort of that benchmark as well. And being in this interesting platform, you know, we're in a fantastic position in the market, to be honest, and this allows us to sort of use our data in a variety of different ways, from onboarding and research, as I mentioned, to actually enriching the sort of end client experience via the production of reporting, research, as I mentioned, and ultimately we want to sort of deliver data-led solutions, and these data-led solutions then connect advisors to their clients and advisors to their asset managers and so on and so forth. And this is ultimately going to be some form of platform that we're going to call Nexus. So this Nexus for financial advisors actually sort of sits in between the back office and other platforms, provides you guys with the required tools to actually complete the advice journey. So one of which, of course, is CashCalc, and as I said, we're going to mention the integrations with the wider market there as well. So without further ado, let's actually, well, this is just the advice journey, but I'm sure many of you are very aware of this. But without further ado, let's jump into the actual demo. So I'm just going to jump into a separate screen. Hopefully you guys can see that just fine. So for those that aren't familiar with this, this is our sort of main dashboard within CashCalc. So this is CashCalc when you first log in. This is what you'll be greeted with, and there'll be a few main buttons that I'd like you guys to sort of familiarize yourself, or main areas. One of which, especially if you're brand new, getting more from CashCalc. So this is all the little bits and pieces. As you can see, I've clearly not done any of them, where you really want to make sure that you're getting the most out of the tool. So that's ultimately where I'd start. Make sure that you've sorted out your branding, created any asset allocation templates that you might need for your own bespoke investment proposition. We do have our own pre-built ones, so it's not the end of the world if you don't have them. And we can ultimately then start getting onboarded with our clients. But as I just mentioned there, we want to make sure that we've sort of got our own branding, got our integration set up and so on and so forth before we actually start to build any particular clients in here, or indeed pull them from the back office. So all I'm going to do here is just jump into our settings. This is where we can sort of customize all of our integrations, our investment proposition, edit any branding, and actually choose which sort of adjustments or assumptions that we might want, i.e. for our default level of inflation or CPI, and so on and so forth. In this case, account preferences like here, just in the front tab, branding, as you can see as well. But more importantly, our integrations is just that second tab down, second from the top. These are all the different integrations that we have within our system as well. It's also worth mentioning that despite these being two-way integrations, we do have an open API. So if you've got a bit more of a bespoke back office, or perhaps your own one, and your IT team want to get in touch with our IT team to actually get something in the mix, we can absolutely facilitate that. So just because you might not see your back office there doesn't mean it's not possible. So as you can see, I've got an IntelliFlow Office login. Now, I just want to put it out there, I'm not an IO whiz, so when I pull through this data, it's going to be very, very bare, but hopefully you'll get the idea of what kind of information you can pull through from IO. So if I just jump back into the home screen, all I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually choose how I want to build my client, or how I want to pull my client through. So just closing through our many upgrade informations there. All I'm going to do here is just hit add a new client in the top left. Super. We're then going to be greeted with two different options. We can either create them as scratch if they're brand new and we don't have them in any form of back office or whatever, or have you, or we can indeed import from our back office. Now, for the sake of this, I'm just going to show you what that import from back office does. It's automatically realized I've got an integration with IO, and I'm just going to search the last name of my client, IO test, or IoT for short. I'm just going to hit search, and it's going to search through the database of all the clients within my IO login that have that last name. So thankfully it's found both of those. All I can do now is select the one I want. Yep, date of birth looks accurate, super, and we can add client. What this is going to do is it's going to talk directly to IO, and it's going to pull through all the information we have in IO that we can use within CashCalc. And that includes sort of incomes, expenses, any retirement plans, sort of any additional mortgages, anything like that will pull through, and actually show you what pulls through here. So within this screen now is the sort of advisor's view of the client dashboard. So before we even go through the tabs along the top, we've actually got a few actions. So we can indeed invite them to a client portal, which is our onboarding system. So if we wanted to send them through a fact find to make sure that we've got all the data that we ever need, we can send them through, get updated on the portal, and have that completely linked, and allow them to then log into the portal, look at their live net worth statements and things like that. If the portal itself is something you want to have a wider demo with, please do get in touch. Well, again, one of our account management team will reach out to you guys just based on the fact that you've attended today. And if that's something you want to look at, please do let us know. So in terms of the information that gets pulled through, again, I'm not an IO whiz. I think I've only added incomes and expenses at this case, but anything in the info tab is what we can pull through and indeed push back into IO. So we'll just jump into the information tab here. We've already got our net worth statement because it's pulled through anything that is related to such thing, but just the overview itself. So we can pull through legal sex, gender, pronouns, all that kind of stuff. State of health. Clearly, this client's not doing too fantastic. And then, of course, if we had any NI numbers and employment status, that I'd pull through as well. So I've got a bog standard address here. Also got this servicing tab, which I'll come on to in a second. But we've got also investments. So if we've got any sort of savings accounts, ISAs, LISAs, whatever that might be, that would then sit in here. The pensions themselves, they would jump into here. And we can now see this little green button, which means it's integrated with our back office. Any additional assets or indeed liabilities will pull through into there, and then incomes and expenses shortly thereafter as well. So we can see the income's being pulled through. That's a net income that we can see. And then, of course, our expenses here. And just while we're on that, I appreciate it was last in the agenda, but I think it's important to showcase now, is should we should we receive this information from our back office and then actually need to update it? You know, we might have the client in front of us right now and we've just pulled this through and said, oh, actually, you've not got my other gym expense, right? This person's got 3 gym expenses, they might have a fourth, or whatever it might be. We can actually simply just add a new expense in here. And I'll just call this gym trial 4 and add this in at £35, not 350 every month. And we can link that priority. We can just say it's lifestyle, for example. Any additional information we might need in there, we can keep it as is, and then we can create that. Now, because we've created that, we now have something in CashCalc that's not in IO. So what we can actually do is, using these tabs along the top, don't have to worry about cash flow or onboarding at the time being, but we can actually use this integrations tab here to actually see what the integration's doing. And you can see along the left-hand side all the information that is possible for us to pull to and from IO. So, and we can also see in that expenses, we've now got a number. So anytime you see a number along the left-hand side is actually something in CashCalc that's currently not set up in IO. So all we have to do is we just have to tell the system where we want that to feed to in IO. So you see all these green ticks here, or green symbols, they're all integrated. We just need to integrate the last one. So all I'm going to do is click onto it. We've just got to let IO know where this sits. As I'm sure many of you guys on here that do use IO, it's a very intricate system, and we don't want to overwrite anything that we shouldn't. We're merely the data processors. You guys are the data controllers. So we want to make sure that it's going to the right spot. So just in this IntelliFlow information, I'm going to choose that category, and I'm going to select gym, and then I'm going to export to IO. That will then give us a nice green button to say that it's exported. We'll then see a nice green integration. And if I was to log into IO now, it would be there. I'm not going to spend 5 minutes trying to find expenses because I am not an IO whiz, but I assure you that has been pushed through and is in the appropriate spot. So again, just jump back into the information tab. Just to lastly touch on sort of one of the main other tabs within this information tab is our servicing tab. So this is something that we're constantly looking to upgrade as well, whether that's linked to with sort of a Calendly-esque integration or whatever it might be, is we've got the ability to actually schedule reviews and add in servicing notes, any key documents, and so on and so forth. So, for example, if we've done a cash flow plan, again, appreciate we haven't just yet, but we've done a cash flow plan, they've filled out an attitude to risk questionnaire, or whatever it might be, we can actually schedule a review for this client. So it's also worth mentioning that this doesn't have to be you scheduling. It could be your paraplanner or whoever it might be that also has a CashCalc account. So again, those that you aren't aware, when you sign up to CashCalc, a advisor gets a free paraplanner license on the back of this as well. So if you are logged in as the paraplanner, you can schedule this review for the advisor, notify who needs to be notified. So in this case, the advisor is me. I'll say the next review date is in sort of 3 months' time, so 23rd of the 10th, 2025, and then that review is going to repeat perhaps every 6 months. We can change that, choose how far in advance we need to be notified, and then how far in advance we need to send information to the client as well. So that might be a new fact find for them to update, an attitude to risk questionnaire, or even our sustainable investing questionnaire as well. So we might want to notify them in 14 days, but send them the documents in 7, for example, and we would just hit submit and everything would be good as gold. So, of course, that's all great and dandy. We've got a sort of centralized place for all of our information to sit, but we actually now want to use that information to actually project a cash flow scenario. So all we'd have to do once we're happy with everything in the information tab is just hit update a calculator here. That's going to take all the information. Again, in this case, it's not a lot. Thankfully, I've got a sort of art attack. Here's what I've built earlier scenario. But all we do here is bring all the information we've got and choose a calculator that we want to put it into. So in this case, we've got our sort of main two cash flow modelers. We've got the gross and the net, but we've also got a number of different other tools as well, such as IHT planning, rental duty, pension drawdown, including a standalone Monte Carlo simulator as well. I'll get onto those towards the end of the session anyway, just to give you a bit of a sort of wider view of what we've got within the system. So all we'd do here is hit which cash flow modeler, so I just say net, and I would just hit export, and it would take us directly into our cash flow to then do some additional fine tweaking to get our current situation ready. But thankfully, as I said, I've got sort of something I've built earlier, so I'm just going to jump out of this client that we've brought through from IO and go into our joint couples account here, Tony Hunt and Melissa Hunt. So this is our recent clients. You can see here, just going to click into these two. I mean, you see all the different plans we might have done previously. Any information, of course, in our information tab, we can see this one's a lot more filled out. So if I go through investments, we can see some savings, pensions, additional assets in the house, incomes and expenses, and so on and so forth. So using this data, what I could do is hit update to calculator. But as I suggested, I've already sort of created an initial cash flow for our current situation. So just give the system a second to load. Super. So you can see I've built a few net cash flow scenarios within here. These are just to give you a bit of a sort of showcase of what you can do within the system. The sky's the limit in terms of the scenarios that we're running. So again, appreciate today we're going to run a bit of a protection case, but we can look at retiring early. We can look at downsizing the house. We can look at a number of different things. What if one pot liquidates faster than the other, or whatever it might be. So in the gross cash flow, we've just got our current situation here. So what I'll do is I'll just go through all the different tabs that I've sort of added to off the back of after pressing update to calculator. So if I just hit view or update forecast, super. So this is our gross cash flow modeler. So for those of you that might have seen the net, this one's a little bit more intricate, but again, at CashCalc, we try and keep things very, very simple. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel within cash flow planning. We just want to make sure that you're able to really easily forecast and showcase the client achieving their goals, or at least showing them how they can do such a thing. So everything on the left is where we're going to sort of start to manipulate that data. And all I'd suggest is just work your way from each tab down. So inputs and timeline, and then we can actually have a look at the cash flow model, which is our second tab after that. So inputs and timeline, first and foremost, we start at assumptions. So this is where we choose when we want the forecast to end, our sort of retail price index, consumer price index, and then perhaps average income. Jump down into people's and timeline as well. So we can choose their risk levels, sort of when they want their pension to be able to be accessed, any lump sum allowance used before the forecasts, and so on and so forth. And we've also got this nice little feature called our events and timeline. So I've added a few extra bits and pieces, but the main ones that do get pre-populated are the things such as ONS life expectancy and retirement. Based on the fact that they've given us a desired retirement age, this is what gets pre-populated. I've also added Tony illness. That's going to sort of be used later on for our protection case. It's not currently in the current situation, but I have added it just for ease of use. And then I've also added mortality just to signify the end of the forecast. Go down another one. We've now got two different savings and investments. So we've got our current account, which is always going to be there. So whenever you create a new cash flow plan, the current account will exist no matter what you do, and that is our sort of spending account. So anytime there is an income that's being received, without the system being told to put it anywhere else, it will sit in the current account, and that is our spending account. So what's used in the event of a shortfall will be used in the current account first, and then it will be attacked in a particular order. So this order can be set using the set pot liquidation order, and it also takes into account pensions, because typically we are talking about a client entering or at retirement. So we can utilize any savings accounts we might have. So this is just a HSBC cash ISA. But if I hit set pot liquidation order, it also looks at our pensions. So in this case, the current account, or indeed the spending account, gets attacked first. This HSBC is last. It's clearly just a bit of an emergency fund. I mean, see, the two other pensions are getting tackled after that. So all I would need to do if I wanted to edit that is just use these sort of arrows to mimic the order, or indeed use the drop down here. We can drag and drop to replace those orders and then update pot liquidation order at the bottom. Talking of pensions, we can see here we've got a few pensions added in. So actually got a few sort of DC pensions or indeed just personal pensions within the top, as well as the state pension. So we've added state pension for Tony and Melissa. They're currently in their 40s, I should have mentioned. So they're well before receiving the state pension, but we do need to add it for forecasting purposes. And if I go down into incomes, we can see, as I mentioned, Tony and Melissa both well in the 40s, so both well still within their sort of on the career ladder, so to speak. And we can see both incomes there, and these are gross incomes, of course, because we're in the gross cash flow model, and we can see they're fairly substantial. We can see as well going down into the expenses. So we've got some essential expenditure. And again, you can go into nice granularity. So this can be, all things gas, water, electric, Netflix, you name it, can all be in here. But equally, if you just want to make it nice and simple and you just tell the client, look, you just tell me everything that's essential and everything you would deem non-essential or indeed lifestyle, we can add it in like that. And it just means everything's sort of nice and neat and tidy. And also we've got our mortgage repayments as well. Any additional contributions that we might have. So we've got an employer contribution that's been set up, so 4 and 3% respectively there, and then any withdrawals that might be set up. So in this case, we've not set up any withdrawals. The guys are well within their sort of income spending capabilities, so they don't need to withdraw from any pensions or savings pots at this time. And then, of course, because they are being looked at for advice, we've got an advice fee that we've set up as well. So there's minimal setup. So the majority of this gets pulled through from the IO integration, provided we've got things within IO that say as such. But things such as just charges and any additional changes in growth templates here, you might want to edit. So you might see in the pensions, if I just hit edit, I've got a balanced benchmark here. So if I just hit edit here, we can actually see whether or not the pension is fully crystallized or uncrystallized, but we're also showing a specific investment return format. So we've got two main ways of showcasing growth. We've got an input, which is essentially a sort of linear investment return, or indeed a template. So we've got a few pre-populated ones. This is what I mentioned at the start, where you can actually start to build in your own investment proposition. It's also worth mentioning that just on the topic of integrations and benchmarks and variable growth templates, is we've now got an integration directly with our sort of fund research tool, FE Analytics. So you can actually pull through FE Analytics data, i.e. client portfolios, into CashCalc to utilize the asset allocations for forward-looking projections. So we can actually build those in here. And again, if a demo on that is worthwhile, do get in touch, because that's something that we're very, very excited for. In fact, I believe the next demo day, Wednesday, is actually showcasing the more recent upgrades to the cash flow modeling tool, as well as integrations as well. So do stay tuned into that as well. Now, we're happy with all our inputs, so we can now look at our cash flow model. So just along the left-hand side, just going to hit cash flow model, and we've got sort of, I want to say, three main models within the gross cash flow. I would argue two, and then one's just the taxes. But we've got our savings over time, which is what you can see here. So these are all our different pots. Again, bit of a crude scenario. We've only got three or four main pots, just two pensions, the spending account, and that's that cash account. And we can see, based on the order that we set, is how that pot gets tackled. So the client has more than enough surplus income to achieve their goals, or indeed to ensure that their expenses are paid off each month. So they are not really running out of money. In fact, this looks like quite a healthy timeline. We've also got our money in versus money out, which just gives a bit more of a reflection on what money's being spent and actually saved towards the end of each year. So if I just jump into money in versus money out here, we can see along the bottom we've got a nice little key just to give a bit of an understanding on this. But our dash line here, if I just move this, our dash line here is lifestyle, our essential expenditure, and then total expenditure is at the top, so we can remove that there. And then essential and lifestyle. So if I was to just remove those two, we can start to actually see what's being covered. So I can actually remove, for example, Melissa's salary. You can see initially almost Tony's salary alone covers our total expenditure. However, if I was to remove total and essential, sorry, and lifestyle even, Tony absolutely covers the essential expenditure. So we can start to look at this for a wider sort of planning basis to see what we want to use X, Y, and Z salary for later on. But at the very least, the essential is being covered by one salary alone, so we can start to do some wider scenarios as well. I do like this sort of functionality because again, it just gives you the ability to sort of move things out of view for the client to actually have a look at certain aspects of their cash flow. And then lastly, on the cash flow modeler is the sort of the taxes element. So whenever the client is paying taxes, what taxes they're paying and what type of tax, whether that's national insurance, income tax, or later down the line, it might be some other tax. Thankfully, it's not. But if we did need to look at CGT and all this kind of stuff, that would be taken into account as well. So jump back into our savings over time. As I mentioned, we can see that this is a very, very healthy scenario. But as I said at the start, this is a protection case. And in the timeline, I did indeed add in a Tony illness. So Tony's health is not in a great state, as I sort of alluded to at the very start. And he's susceptible to a sort of hereditary illness, and this could happen at any given moment. But we, as the advisor, just want to give him a sort of what if scenario because we really think he ought to start paying a protection premium. So all I'm going to do is press this little plus button in the top left, and I'm going to create a new forecast. Now, rather than creating a blank forecast and me inputting all that detail again, all I'm going to do is clone from existing, clone from current situation, and I'm just going to call this Tony illness. Super. Create that, and now hopefully you guys will see why I've added that sort of timeline event of Tony illness. Because what we're going to do is we're going to utilize that timeline to actually showcase what would happen at a specific time, and we can actually manipulate that later as well. So by linking something to a timeline event rather than a particular age, we can just give this a bit more of a real-time what if scenario. So now that that's been cloned, Tony illness has been cloned. Of course, it looks exactly the same for the time being. All I'm going to do now is jump into inputs and timeline, and I'm just going to change Tony's income. So rather than Tony's income finishing at, it is linked to illness, as you can see, illness is 65. That's just for ease of use. All I've done here is hit edit, and then scroll all the way down, start, which is current, and then end at Tony illness. Now the reason I've done that, I've just done that in sort of prep. It would have previously been linked to 65 or indeed retirement. I've linked it to Tony's illness because what I can do now, just for sort of ease of time, is if I go into people and timeline now, scroll down to our timeline event, and I'm just going to say, okay, we've linked that Tony illness event. The expenses are still the same, so they're going to go into perpetuity, or indeed until the end of the forecast. And I'm just going to link Tony's illness and actually drag this down to when Tony is 51. So the event's been updated, and you won't see any change immediately until we go into the cash flow model. And we see a drastic change now. So what we can also do, it's also worth mentioning, is we can actually do this live in front of the client and show the effect live in front of the client via our stress testing tab. So we're just going to stress testing here. You can see these market simulations, and this is something I definitely have a go at as well, because we can simulate certain market events. It might be a shift of 10% drop and no recovery, or so on and so forth, or even the COVID bubble. There's plenty of sort of what if scenarios you can do. But in this case, I'm just going to look at events and timelines. And I've got Tony's illness here. And in the same instance as what I've done in the inputs and timeline, I can actually drag and drop this. So again, if Tony was to fall ill a year earlier, what that would look like. And this is again just another great use of the sort of the timeline event, because we can use this for things like, nice things like retiring early. Can Tony afford to retire? If Tony wasn't going to fall ill, what if he retired at 64 instead of 65, and so on and so forth. And we can see what effects that would have on the actual timeline and the actual growth of pots over time. But in this case, we're doing it on Tony's illness. So we can very easily see, it doesn't take a genius to realize that this is a lot different to that initial scenario. But in that cash flow model situation, if I just jump back in, what we can actually do is we can just do a live comparison straight away from that illness versus the current situation. So we just press compare, we can see our illness here, we compare with current situation. Again, if we had different other scenarios as well, which we will in a second, we can compare and contrast based on this as well. But we can see a huge difference. And just again, just to reiterate what I've done here, all I've done is edit the income and I've linked this to Tony's illness. Tony's illness is dragged to 250. However, all the expenses are still going until the end of the forecast, or indeed, except for the mortgage, of course, that's paid off slightly earlier when Tony is 60. But all the other essential and lifestyles are at 100. Now, it's also worth mentioning, again, just for the purposes of showcasing the functionality of CashCalc, we can add certain steps of expenses. Appreciate these expenses go into perpetuity or indeed until 100. They might not spend that for the rest of the time, so we can add, a sort of stepped. This is essential expenditure from 45 to 70, and then 70 to till death, for example. So that is another option that you can do. And we would look at that in a separate scenario I've run before, where it's sort of a reduction in expenditure over time to help the client achieve their goals. But in this case, we're just going to say that the expense just stays, again, just to really sort of send this message home back to Tony and Melissa, because right now they don't have any protection. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to then clone this forecast again and actually create a protection case for them. So again, cloning from existing. This time I'm going to clone from Tony's illness. And I'm just going to call this Tony protection. I'm going to create that. And then there's just a few little inputs that we need to add, one of which is a sort of savings pot. So we're going to add an empty savings pot because in this instance, what we're going to do is we're going to have a sort of a payout should Tony fall ill. And this payout we don't want going into the current account because we might want to later invest that elsewhere. We don't want that immediately covering us. So all I'm going to do is add a savings pot here. I'm just going to call this Tony protection payout, and the starting value is going to be 0. We can change the investment rate if we wanted to. It might be 2.7 for example, and then we're just going to leave all of that there. We can then choose what kind of income we want to receive, whether that's via interest or dividends, if indeed it was a sort of a full savings pot, and the income or income format as well. And then all I'm going to do is add that savings pot, and I'll just make sure that that is last, which it is. Super. Again, we can change that later on, but initially we've not got anything in that, so we don't want it tackling any expense, of course. Also going to add in an expense. So we're going to add in monthly premiums. So we'll just call this protection premium. And we've went for the full on gold standard, and that's £100 a month. And that's going to go from now until Tony falls ill. And we'll add in that there. Super. Now, of course, comes the actual protection payout. Again, I don't know specifics, but we could just add in other income here, and we're just going to call this Tony's. Super. And we'll call this protection illness payout, and we'll say that this is 250,000. We'll say it's non-taxed, and that's going to be one-off. So just changing this drop down here, one-off, and that starts when Tony falls ill. And again, we're just going to adjust for inflation. So we want the equivalent of 250,000, and then hit add income. So that's just going to be one-off income. We've said that it's non-tax, so the system knows when we have a look at the taxes, nothing will be done. And we can then jump into the cash flow model, and we can see, if I just stop comparing, it's just going to calculate the model now, and we can see what this kind of protection would look like over time. So hopefully it doesn't take too long. Of course, I share my screen and everything slows down, but we'll see. Super. Fantastic. So again, Still, we can still see red in comparison to the first current situation, but again, we haven't reinvested that yet. We might want to then say this money is then going to go into, one of the variable growth templates and so on and so forth, and we can actually have a look at that immediately if we wanted to. So again, before we're even doing some comparisons, we can jump back into our inputs and timeline, go into our savings. We can say, of course, there's nothing in it in the initial instance, but we do want this on our template. We can link it to the risk that they have. So I've set this client as a risk level 3, so it's only going to show me risk level 3 scenarios. I can override that simply just by clicking on there, and we can see different example benchmarks, for example. So they are still young. They might want to jump into an adventurous fund, for example, and we can see that growth rate over time. Update that savings pot, and again, we can always update that later on down the line. But we can immediately then see, because we've actually invested that income, what kind of effect that might have. And again, it might not have the desired effect that we want, but that's what that's gonna look like at that initial instance. So if we jump into stress testing, we can actually see all those different growth rates over time and actually what that looks like. So there's a few other bits and pieces that we can do. Is actually looking at the yearly breakdown, so we can see. Let's jump into here, that penultimate tab. So that yearly breakdown just shows us the sort of costs and charges over time, any incomes, expenses, and so on and so forth. We can see that gross money in at 2030 is obviously drastically different to everything else. We can see that net amount, that illness payout, no tax there. Melissa's still being taxed, and it goes into this sort of the different tax bandings as well. If she was slightly higher, go into that 40% tax bracket as well, and we can go on and have a look at that. But again, just in this instance, just back into the cash flow, we can just do a wider comparison within the sort of current situation, or indeed comparing that protection versus that illness that we mentioned. So we've added on a few extra years of sort of safety or a buffer there with that protection case. Again, scenarios will differ, and the payout might be larger, or indeed you might reinvest it into something that's going to provide a bit of extra time, or indeed we can actually look at sort of other bits and pieces such as sort of guaranteed lifetime income and standard lifetime income that we've got with the likes of standard life within here as well. So again, that's some bits and pieces that your account manager can absolutely show going forwards as well. Before I jump onto the reports as well, in fact, I will show the reports now. So just to give you an idea of what our reporting looks like. So we've got three situations we can see here, and we've got a few other reporting options. Again, we might want to just look at current situation versus protection, or indeed the illness versus protection here as well, just to give a bit more of a wider scenario. So we can see those two situations there, ready for us, and we can choose what we want to include. So if we do want to include events and timeline, in this instance, because we've only added the illness, it's probably not worth it, but we can add in the growth rate breakdown as well and choose what kind of format we want that. So if we want to stitch this to a wider report, might be beneficial to actually use a Word report instead. Equally, we can jump into a PDF report as well. And if I hit that, hopefully it loads. If not, I will pause for questions as well. To appreciate course of the time, we've got another 6 minutes, but hopefully this loads. But while that is loading, I just will talk briefly just on our other tools as well. So within our other tools here, we've got plenty of different sort of cash flow scenario tools that we've got. A lot of those have historically, as you can see, been sort of standalone tools, but we are doing a number of different upgrades within our gross cash flow modeler, a lot of which has already happened. So the likes of CGT, salary and dividends, and so on and so forth. And that is actually going to be, as I mentioned, going to be covered in our next demo day Wednesday session, I believe in 2 weeks' time. Our marketing team, I'm sure, is well and truly letting everyone know on the socials. So that's something to look forward to as well. I just wanted to touch lastly on just some of the wider integration stuff. So within our analytics area, so if I was to just jump back into our information tab, I believe the report's open. I'll just show that. If I was just to jump back into our information tab on our previous client, so Murphy IoT, the one that we've got an integration with. If we had valuation data directly from platform, i.e. platform to IO and then IO to us, we can actually pull that information and push it into CashCalc, into analytics to do some wider scenarios. So I've got that Aviva pension here. If I click into it, I've actually got an investment breakdown. I can import the latest valuation, and that's going to pull that directly from IO. So in this case, as I said, I'm not an IO whiz. I think I just added one unit or multiple units of the same fund just to give it a valuation. We've got two buttons here. We can export that portfolio to analytics, so that can then pull through all the holding data into analytics, and we can do some wider reviews, chuck that across our benchmark and so on and so forth. Or indeed, we can just generate a medium scan, which is essentially a nice little portfolio report that we usually pull through and populate within analytics. You can populate it directly in here using the functionality of analytics. Here we go. We've just got our last little bit here. Of course, anywhere you see your advisor logo would indeed be your advisor logo. But in a matter of moments, we've got a 28-page report. Again, we can shorten this depending on what you include. And we can see the sort of the breakdown here, any investments, saving pots over time, that growth rate that we added to total returns, incomes, expenses, contributions, charges and fees, all that good stuff, as well as money in versus money out. And then, of course, our current situation. Again, a bad one, but then we're looking later down the line at our protection payout. We can see that larger payout on the money in versus money out, and we see that that helps us elongate that life a little bit extra as well. So there's a few other what if scenarios you can do, as I mentioned, but I would, plenty of sort of tweaking of the goalpost, so to speak, to better facilitate the client's overall position. Appreciate we've only got 3 minutes now. Didn't mean to go on as long as I did, but hopefully that's been really useful, guys. Jacob's very kindly given a link to our future Demo Day Wednesday sessions, where myself or even a few of my colleagues will be showcasing a few of the other wider parts of the tool, including FE Analytics, a bit more of the cash flow scenarios as well. So yeah, please do get in touch. I'll pause for any questions, give it a minute or so. If nothing back, then I'll leave you guys to the rest of your day. Just jump into here as well, just so you guys have got, if you do want to reach out to myself, do connect with me on LinkedIn. Just scan that barcode and be happy to get in touch. As I said, I really hope you guys enjoyed that session and found it useful. Doesn't look like there's any questions in the chat. So guys, I'll leave you be. Thanks very much for your time and have a good rest of your week. Thanks all.